Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. Next, we turn to Moscow, where Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This year marks the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries, China and Russia. The enduring partnership between the two neighbors has blossomed over the past 7 decades. When Premier Li met with his Russian counterpart Dmitry Medvedev on Tuesday in St. Petersburg, their goal was to make this partnership even closer. The two sides have signed a series of agreements that cover trade, energy, and technology. China-Russia ties have evolved to grow stronger than ever, according to both sides, especially in a time of global uncertainty. The two nations have been learning from each other and have made some grand plans for the road ahead. That's according to officials from both sides. How did these experiences and common visions bring about the best in one another? Let's rewind back to our trip to St. Petersburg Economic Forum earlier this year and try to find some answers from the Russian society. A journey to a Chinese culture summer camp in a classroom for these Russian girls gives me a glimpse of how curious and interested Russia is about China today. 10 to 14 years old, they are immersing themselves for 2 weeks in Chinese culture during the summer vacation. Doing Chinese watercolor paintings and learning the Chinese language are part of it. And one has to confess, they are doing quite a good job, arguably better than me.
Hi.
Yes. 你叫什么名字？几岁了？
我叫 Emily， 我是10岁。
10岁 ，Emily， 你在画什么？
我画小狗和小猫。
啊，小狗和小猫。Wow, you got a lot of paintings already here.
Yeah.
You have to show them one by one. 你给我们都看看来。这是谁呀？这是什么？
这是熊猫。
熊猫啊。Their artistic achievements at the summer camp are not limited to panda painting, but also learning to sing in Chinese, starting from the most well-known Chinese song. What an achievement! Nurturing their curiosity about another culture and language, this time about China, are teachers like them and their teams. One from China and one from Russia. These two ladies have been working together for years to make it a reality. Both the Chinese culture summer camp like this and the teaching of Chinese language under the curriculum of Russian schools. So much fun to join that drawing class. Well, my work is not the best, first of all, but we got some teachers standing with me right here. 你好.
你好.
Is it difficult to teach them Chinese?
It's difficult for our students to study Chinese because they have never learned this language before. But learning this language is simple if you teach it while introducing Chinese culture to them.
Learning the culture first and then learn the language is much easier.
That's right. And this is a partner who has been working together with us for 8 years. She's a deputy headmaster of a middle school here in St. Petersburg. The school is also the first one in St. Petersburg to offer credit courses for students to learn Chinese.
The first class ever teaching Chinese in St. Petersburg. Wow!
private class, yes.
Yeah. Do you also speak Chinese?
По-китайски не говорю пока.
I've not yet studied Chinese, but I'm very interested in Chinese culture. I want to start learning the language from next year.
Показывают нам пример.
So if you're learning Chinese next year, I'm going to learn Russian next year too.
他要学习в следующем году она будет учить русский.
But when you are learning Chinese, I'm sure a lot of your students have already graduated, 8 years already.
Когда мы начинали изучать китайский язык,
Today, there are many students in our school taking Chinese classes. Some students began learning at a very young age. Till now, many of them have graduated and have been to China for further study. Their successful experience has established a good path for younger students to follow suit. Since these students are studying and adapting to life in China, those younger students are encouraged to learn Chinese.
Спасибо.
Спасибо. Okay, thank you. Bidding them and the wonderful girls at the summer camp goodbye, I arrived at one of the most prominent universities of Russia, the St. Petersburg State University. Yes, it was also established by Peter the Great 300 years ago. But today, it has established itself as the cradle of the biggest names in Russian history. Science, art, politics, you name it. I am meeting and talking to one of the most informed minds on campus about China and Russia. Professor Nikolai Samoilov began to study China and the Chinese language when he was still a young student at the St. Petersburg State University back in the 1960s. But as a real China hand, his knowledge about China then was not limited to the political challenges the two countries had then, but managed to study through the decades about Russians' perspectives about China and the Chinese, and why they matter in the relations between the two countries throughout history. You've been doing research about China-Russia relations, especially how Russians look at China throughout the centuries. Started from commercial ties, isn't it?
Russian-Chinese relations started from this place, from St. Petersburg, and the first contacts between Russia and China were organized by Peter the Great. He also was interested in China, and he wanted to have more very beautiful Chinese things. So the first Russian museum has collected these Chinese goods, artifacts, porcelain vases, cups, and so on. So they appeared a romantic variant of Russian image of China, like a fairy tale, something like that.
How romantic was it to you? But of course things have changed as time goes by. More philosophical understanding of China, isn't it?
First translations of Confucius appeared in Russia in the 18th century, but of course his works were translated not from Chinese but from French. But in the 19th century they appeared real translations from Chinese, and many Russian philosophers, especially Leo Tolstoy, the most famous Russian writer, he liked works by Confucius, and he wanted to study his works and also some Taoist books, and he tried to translate them into Russian. It was very important.
Yeah, their understanding, their version, is it similar to real, interpretations of Confucianism and Taoism?
He thought that ancient Chinese philosophy was similar to the Christianity, to the ideas of Jesus Christ, the idea of the whole love people to people, and the idea of mutual understanding of other principles of Confucius were very important not only for Chinese, but for the whole humanity.
And from romantic to philosophical, but of course later history turned. There are a lot of different periods of time. When you look back, extremely interesting when it comes to China-Russia interactions. To the Russians of that time, what was China like?
At the end of the 19th century, there appeared a lot of Chinese immigrants on the territory of the Russian Empire, in Siberia and in the Far East. And of course, these immigrants were very poor people.
So ideology later became such an important part of the link between China and Russia. At the time, after the October Revolution, particularly in the former Soviet Union, how is the perception of China changing in the eyes of the common Russians?
After the October Revolution, and especially in 1924, 1927, when the National Revolution arose in China, it's interesting that even common people supported the struggle of the Chinese people against imperialism, against militarism. The most famous Soviet poet, Vladimir Mayakovsky, at that time he was the most popular. He named one of his rhymes the best rhyme, because he said that it was very important for him to know from newspaper. He knew that revolutionary forces and Revolutionary Army and Shanghai workers fought against militarists in Shanghai.
But later, of course, Professor, there were ups and downs of the relationship between the People's Republic of China and then the former Soviet Union. There was about 20 or 30 years of cold times. How did people then, influenced by the official rhetoric in former Soviet Union about China?
I think that during 1950s, when it was a period of a great friendship between two peoples, all common people in Russia, both in Russia and in China, they thought that our big countries were very good friends. In mid-1980s, they appeared new ideas, and it was interesting that after re-establishment, good relations between, friendship relations between the two countries, common people, both in Russia and China, believed that our countries should be friends. I saw it in China because I came to China for the first time in 1985, and I met some people who didn't see Russians, Soviet people, for 20 years, and I saw how friendly they talked to me, and they were very surprised when they knew that I am from the Soviet Union.
So let's move on from there. You know, later, former Soviet Union changed. You have a lot of internal debates and search about the road that you wanted to take. While in China, the reform and opening up spread around the whole country. And China certainly is taking on a new path as well. So how does the perception about one another evolving as a result of this?
It was a time of very big debates about future perspectives of the Soviet Union and then of Russia, and many people thought that maybe Chinese way to progressive society would be better than capitalist variant, typical capitalist variant. But at that time, during the time of Yeltsin, Russian economists and members of Russian government, they stood for the Western way to progressive development. But now some people thought that maybe it was better for Russia to copy the Chinese variant, and maybe the Deng Xiaoping program was better for such countries like China and Russia for their way to progressive society.
I'm sure that debate will go on for some time. Now the world has been changing so much. Some people even say this is a critical juncture you see a lot of basic debate about where the world should be going, and with what ideas that we should be able to embrace the future of the world. Will China and Russia have strong foundation to be able to communicate well, and also to be able to do something to inspire or to cooperate about new ideas?
Now we have a very good opportunity to cooperate in some very important economic and social projects. For example, One Belt and One Road initiative came from China. It's not only a Chinese program, but I think it's a new variant for development for many countries on the way of the new Silk Road. And I think that it is not only economic and political project, but also civilizational, cultural project.
And the birds are churning for you. You're talking about what today can we do together. But many would wonder, is it more about relating to one another as a result of being whether the enemy or the rival of the United States?
I don't like such words like enemy, but of course there is a very big competition between the United States and China, the United States and Russia, and maybe between the United States and the European Union. So we are living in the time of very big competition, like big Olympic Games in the sphere of economy, policy, social life, and so on. And I think that in the 21st century, of course...
But you know, in Olympic Games, it's friendship first, competition second.
And I think that the 21st century will be a time of these big, not Olympic, but big games, yeah, big games, but not wars.
We hope that is the case. As we come into the end of our discussion today, I really wonder, as an educator and as a researcher about China, to you, Professor, what are the most important questions or topics that you have in mind about China?
I think that the most important is to study Chinese culture, Chinese cultural traditions. So when we are talking about China, we have to say that it is the oldest civilization in the world, and every country has an opportunity to study from China, to learn. And I think that in the 21st century, in all universities of all countries and in even in primary schools, it is necessary to study Chinese history and some aspects of Chinese culture.
I see. Professor Samalov, what a pleasure talking to you, helping us to understand really the evolution of China and Russia through history. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.